you communicated is the form and formless. The form is formless and formless is form. The nothingness is everything and everything is nothing. The emptiness is fullness and fullness is emptiness. This is actually complete realization. So in ancient Indian wisdom we say, I am consciousness, that what they say is Aham Brahmasmi. Then all this is consciousness, Sarvam Khalvida Brahma. All this is manifestation of consciousness, Sarvam Khalvida Brahma. So that actually is both the real recognition of the self and recognition of the universe as a manifestation of that is what is realization. Just recognition that Aham Brahmasmi is not complete. Just recognition Sarvam Khalvida Brahma is not complete. The realization has to be complete in the sense Aham Brahmasmi and Sarvam Khalvida Brahma. I am real, I am consciousness, and all this is a manifestation of consciousness. Form is formless, emptiness is fullness. So that becomes the total, the complete realization. So then he spoke of creative process where the various forms are born, the forms grow, and the forms are dissolved, and newer forms are created, eventually leading to higher and higher level of complexity of life form. The life form eventually recognizes the self. That is, the universe or the consciousness is recognizing itself through us. So that gives us a position in the whole grand scale of so-called the universe. So we can be happy that we have some place there. Even though we feel very small, tiny particles. So in grand scale of the universal scale, we have some place. Okay, we have place in terms of recognizing this self with ourselves. We are actually like a sort of mirror. Yeah, your questions?
I have a question. Now, Andrew, you talked about dimension of creative expression. You can keep adding more dimensions.
Sorry?
Like you can keep adding more dimensions, such as love. Love is another dimension, right? If that, can we keep adding more dimensions? If you look at the world, you can keep adding more, there's no limit. I took an example, we can keep adding love as a dimension. So
creativity is one dimension. There are multiple dimensions: love, intelligence, then energy. So is the creativity includes all the dimensions, or each dimension is you have to add?
Creativity includes all dimensions, but I think I don't think love is separate from the essence of creativity itself and what's compelling the universe to exist. In my own deepest moments of realization, there was the recognition that love in a way that we can't ordinarily think about it. It's transrational, it's a transrational knowing of an absolute principle, the nature of which is experienced as a kind of love that is all-consuming. It's the nature of the ultimate mystery that lies beyond life and death. So I don't think we can in any way separate love from creativity, from higher and lower dimensions of complexity and all this, because love is the ultimate nature of all of it. And the direct realization of that truth changes everything in us. It removes all doubt. But it has to be realized. It has to be directly experienced. But only when it's directly realized, directly experienced, it destroys the mind in the best possible way. And only in light of that kind of depth of the experience of love, of that depth, that intensity, the mind is destroyed, the ego is destroyed, doubt is destroyed, and that's it. That's not a thought, it's an experience.
So when ego drops, automatically love flows.
Yes. but the reason that what we're talking about, the reason that what we're calling love is flowing, because that's the nature of reality at that kind of primordial depth. That's what is. But you see, the word love, I always feel hesitant to use that word, because when we use the word love, we say, I love my father, I love my mother, I love my children, I love my pets, I love pizza. And the thing is, what we're speaking about here, it's a completely different dimension of experience. The direct knowledge of this kind of love is inherently transformative, because of how all-consuming and absolute, because it's a recognition of the absolute. It's not relative love; it's absolute love, and it really does change everything. And when anybody experiences that kind of depth, as I was just saying, their mind disappears, literally. And in that there's submission, spontaneous submission. And then there's the experience of what, as Jesus said, not my will but thy will be done. And it's choiceless. It's a choiceless submission. And in that there's only that. There's nothing else.
You have a question?
Yeah. So you described light enlightenment as a journey of the self, the small self to the self. My question is, why should there be enlightenment? Why God forgot himself or did not know himself and then knew himself? What is the purpose of all this God or this self going from unknown to the known, nothing to everything, being everything or nothing? Why did come into the duality and then come back into the...
Well, I have an educated guess. So nobody knows for sure, but there have been educated guesses. So my educated guess goes something like this, and I think it's similar to what we hear in Vedanta. So this is my metaphysical speculation, my metaphysical fantasy, which ultimately means nothing, so you have to understand that this is just simply a anthropomorphic, you know what anthropomorphic means? Human, it means a humanized perspective on cosmic truths that can't really be understood with the human mind. And knowing that, we say, I'm going to try and understand it anyway. So we admit our helplessness and our incapacity from the very beginning, but we work with what we've got, which is which is ourselves. So my understanding is, I wanted to understand this. So I said, well, we have to imagine what is it like to be God. If we want to know why because the question is, why does something exist versus nothing? Why does the universe exist? And from a certain point of view, and the point of view that Prabhuji and I started discussing tonight, from the deepest perspective of timelessness, formlessness, and pure being, the universe doesn't exist, was never existed. And yet apparently it does exist, because we're having the discussion about the fact that it doesn't exist in a space, in a place, in bodies and minds and personalities that seem to exist in time and in space and in form. So apparently the relative world exists in its own context. So in any case, so let's try and imagine what it would be like to be God before the universe was created. Based on my experience and my understanding tells me that God was existing in perfect bliss and emptiness and fullness, absolute contentment, indescribable joy, unimaginable freedom. For countless billions of eons of no time, eternally in eternity, having nothing, knowing nothing, and being no one, forever. So it's this concept or this truth about eternity, the eternal nature of being itself. We have to imagine what would it be like to do nothing forever in absolute perfect joy, perfect equanimity, perfect happiness, perfect contentment. So what I think happened, and of course I don't know what happened, but what my imagination, what my creative imagination and intuitive human intelligence tells me what happened, is that if I was doing nothing forever, for literally for eternity, if I'd done nothing, and I was God, and I remember being God is different than being human, because if you're God, you're indestructible and you're fearless. You're not a mortal human being who can be hurt or wounded or traumatized. So as that immortal, indestructible being, if I've been doing absolutely no thing whatsoever for countless billions of eons of no time, for eternity, for no reason whatsoever, it's perfectly understandable to me that the thought might arise in my no mind, maybe I should do something. You say, why? Why not? Because you're God. You're always free. If you're God, there's never a loss of freedom. Freedom is your nature. Your nature is indestructible. And if you've been doing nothing for literally forever, it's reasonable that a thought might arise in you, know, maybe I should do something. But of course, in your profound and inconceivable equanimity, that thought passed away. And then after countless billions of eons of no time passed again, this thought may arise again in your mind, and it would be released. But imagine this continuing to happen over inconceivable periods of no time whatsoever. This could build, on the surface of being, this could build, a creative tension could accumulate, slowly accumulate, slowly accumulate, slowly accumulate, building up, building up, building up, building up, building up, building up. Should I do something? Should I do something? Should I do something? I'm doing it. I let it happen. I let the universe explode into being. I did it. I let it happen. Why? Why not? Because if you're God and you're indestructible and fearless, there's no reason why not.
There are two dimensions we are bringing here. One is called creation and other is called evolution. So both we are going by what we call so-called science, saying that billions of years back some creation happened. Okay, God created the universe in burst of creativity. Is one dimension. We'll explore that. Second dimension is that there is an evolution happened. As according to science, the evolution is a forces of nature, where you are a product of what you call as survival for the fittest and a constant competition and race. What Andrew is bringing in is a dimension that is not just the competition or survival of the fittest. There is a divine dimension to evolution, where probably science did not touch upon the consciousness dimension to evolution. It brought in only the physical survival dimension. He is bringing in the dimension of the consciousness as a creative impulse, creative mechanism behind evolution, which gives us makes us a little bit better, feel better that we are not just robots surviving in this, or rather machines which are trying to survive, but there is something more to that than that, and we have we are a part of the bigger picture of God, creative impulse of God driving our evolution. So in a sense, I am feeling that Andrew is bringing in the consciousness dimension to the theory of evolution. Am I right?
Absolutely correct.
Okay. So that actually gives a little bit of freedom for us, that okay, we are not just some of the animals who have survived the fittest race, but we are slightly more than that. So that's what he is trying to bring in.
Okay.
It's okay. So the next dimension which is bringing, I would, is there something more to that? What I understood?
There's more, but you understood it very well.
Okay.
Understanding
Yeah.
very
What
well.
is that more?
That well, in terms of your question, there is you asked because in my understanding and my interpretation, in the leap from nothing to something, in the leap from being to becoming, there's the with the burst from with the creative burst into energy and matter. This divine energy and intelligence, and this divine energy and intelligence could only, from the side of the time process at the very beginning, could only know itself within the ceiling or the limitation of the creative intelligence of energy and matter. In other words, we're going from absolute knowing in emptiness to relative knowing in and through form. So this knowing, it is said, goes all the way up and all the way down. So the interiority of an atom, we could say there's a measure of knowingness, of cognizance in the interior of an atom. And when an atom becomes a molecule, that capacity for knowing and cognizance complexifies ever so much. When a molecule turns into a cell, which means takes a leap from energy and matter into life, into very simple life, this cognizance complexifies and takes a leap. And when a cell becomes part of a body, part of a larger organism, and then especially when we're speaking about life, very simple forms of life have very simple capacity for knowing, for consciousness. It's very primitive. And as the complexity of the life form develops, as it continues to complexify, the capacity for interiority, for knowing, for consciousness itself within the context of life, the life experience, complexifies and complexifies and complexifies. So the extraordinary thing about being a human being, especially human beings at a very high degree of consciousness and complex cognition, the miracle from the perspective of evolutionary becoming for consciousness itself is that when a life form gains a capacity not only for knowing, but for self-reflective knowing, self-reflective awareness. Self-reflective awareness means not only that I'm aware, but I'm aware of the fact that I'm aware. In Buddhism, they call it Buddha nature. So the Zen master asks his student, does a dog have Buddha nature, which is awareness? And the student says, yes, the dog has Buddha nature, because it has consciousness. Second question is, can a dog become enlightened? The answer is no, because a dog doesn't have the capacity to be aware of awareness. It's only when awareness gains the capacity for self-reflection that what we're calling enlightenment becomes possible, because enlightenment is when consciousness recognizes itself, and in that recognition there's a dissolution, as we were speaking about earlier, this identification with the smaller separate self. So the miracle from the perspective of cosmic consciousness is that when a human being reaches this very high degree of development, that the energy and intelligence that created the universe and is creating the universe, for the very first time gains the capacity to awaken to itself, to recognize itself and realize itself through form. So the universe awakens through its own creations, which is us, and it becomes self-aware through us. And so from a certain perspective, we could say that God, or the energy and intelligence that created the universe, allowed himself or herself or itself to experience degrees of unconsciousness through the journey from energy and matter to life, to mind, to higher mind. So from the deepest depth perspective, from the perspective of the self that's never been born and never entered the stream of time, and has never thought of creating a universe and never did, none of this ever happened. Ever. 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 But from the perspective of the fact that it has happened and that it is happening, we're having this conversation about it. Because it would have had to have happened for us to have this discussion. And I do believe this discussion is really happening. This is my personal conviction. Not everybody might agree. Some people say, well, you think you're having this discussion, but it really never happened. This is all a dream in the mind of God. He's happily abiding in his samadhi. This is all just a dream. Don't you know it, you fool? Wake up!
Yes.
So it's my personal belief that that both these are two truths that are simultaneously true, and they, from my perspective, they have equal value. One is not better or more important than the other. They're both absolutely true, in my understanding. But as Prabhuji was explaining a few minutes ago, in this kind of understanding, from my perspective, this fully empowers, spiritually empowers the reality of incarnation, the fact of incarnation, the fact that you exist, the fact that I exist in this form, and in this context suddenly now becomes spiritually and creatively and evolutionarily so potentially relevant if we wake up, if we realize who we truly are, if we wake up from the dream of the relative existence and realize our absolute non-relative divine identity, true self, then this body-mind personality is seen as a vehicle through which this creative intelligence can consciously create itself. And I personally believe this is what we were meant to awaken to this truth, and in doing so we can consciously create the universe as the creator in the form of the body, mind, and personality of our own unique self.
I'll take up one
Sure.
one from what he said. So let us say I wake up. A dreamed character woke up. So then what is there is the person who is sleeping, not the dreamed character has disappeared. When I wake up from the dream, I no longer exist as the dreamt character. I am actually the original. When I woke up from as an individual, as a personal self, I woke up as a universal self or cosmic self or God. Now I cannot recreate the dreaming character. The dreaming character was all my dream, it just disappeared. So yesterday night I had a dream, and the dream character I can't recall, it's gone. So now I have realized there was never an evolution, there was never a creation, there was never a time, there was never a space. Now what is the role for me to participate in this evolutionary process?
None.
None. It's over. The game is up.
Yeah.
So once you wake up from the dream, you realize that there was never a creation, there was never a time, there was never a space, there never was a question also. So it is a sort of waking up from the dream. Okay. So coming back to the creation as such, the creation as per the Vedantic thought process, there is nothing called creation. Okay, there is a manifestation of what was in a subtle form, appears as a gross form, and possibly it happens moment to moment, not even at once upon a time. Not once upon a time in a billion years it didn't happen. It is happening this moment because there is no concept of time and space in that cosmic self. For example, when I take a breath in, there's a life in me. The breath out, there's a death in me. In that moment, I am born. Along with me, the universe is also born. It's happening moment to moment rather than once upon a time when a Big Bang happened something happened. Rather, the Big Bang is happening at this moment, moment to moment, and moment to moment, I am appearing and I am disappearing along with the universe. So, possibly for me, it never was a Big Bang. It's a Big Bang is also a part of the story, which is a part of time and space. The second part is what we call as there is never a creation actually. There is no objects. So when I see you, actually there's no you and me. There's only seeing. There's not even seeing. There's only knowing. There's no only knowing. It's only being, which means both of us don't exist in that sense. So the question always asks for a frame of reference. In that frame of reference, all answers are correct. But the moment you change the frame of reference, the questions are not relevant. The creation was never happened. There was no creation. There are no objects. There are no thoughts. The timeless, the ageless, the birthless is all that is there.
Also true.
Also true. So, as the moment you change the frame of reference of the question disappears.
Yeah. So one way I have to help clarify why that's the case is if we imagine this is a thought experiment to explain, because how could both truths be absolutely true? From my perspective, both are absolutely true. So we want to imagine the ocean is a metaphor for the timeless, formless, beginningless, and endless, eternal ground of all being. If we were so deeply realized, if we are awakening to this ocean of being, was so profound, that we were resting peacefully at the bottom of the ocean. Bottom of the ocean, there's no sound. You can't see anything, it's completely dark. It's full. And you can't see, you can't see the surface of the ocean. There's only that. And there's no awareness of anything else. But as we get, and also there's, as I was saying before, there's an inconceivable freedom because nothing exists and nothing has ever existed. But as we begin to approach the surface, suddenly a little bit of light appears. We can't see form yet, but you see a little bit of light appear. You start to hear some vibrations where there's sound. There's something happening up there. And if you keep approaching the surface, you start to be able to hear more and see there's more light, there's more commotion, there's more activity. And you suddenly reach the surface, and you bring your head above the surface, and you look around and you go, oh my goodness, there's an entire world with all kinds of things happening here. Now the ocean in this metaphor represents timelessness and formlessness. And in this ocean, literally, the universe hasn't been created yet. But when we reach our head above the surface, in this metaphor you could say that our body is experiencing the freedom of the freedom of infinite being that exists before anything ever happened. While we lift our head above the water, there's a simultaneous awareness of the world of time and space and the entire creative process. And then someone can come along in a boat and say, "Are you okay?" You say, "I'm fine." So come in the boat, so then they can pull us up out of the boat, onto the boat. And when they pull us up out of the boat, suddenly, the minute our feet remove our feet from the water, simultaneously our awareness of timelessness and its inherent unimaginable freedom is gone, because now we're completely captivated by the world of time and form. And either we can stay in this boat and then go to the land, get off the boat, and then the drama begins. The drama begins. The story begins to unfold. Now you remember how that story unfolds depends upon how conscious you are. If you forget who you really are, you'll get lost in the dream. But it's my firm conviction that if you don't forget, or if you're living in the full cognizance of who you really are, you don't get lost in the dream, but you see that this is God's own dream. But it's real. So if you know who you are, you're not going to get lost there. You're going to realize who you are, and you're going to consciously create this world as his or her hands and feet, mind and body. Understand? You won't get lost. But if you the minute you get back in that boat and you go out to the middle of the ocean, you jump into the ocean, you go down to the bottom, it's all gone. It literally never happened. And the deeper you go into the ocean, it goes from being a dream. Oh, I thought it was real. Oh, it's just a dream. You keep on sinking deeper and deeper into the ocean. You literally forget at the bottom you literally forget it ever happened. And there's not even a thought that anything ever did happen. There's no thought about anything. So, how all this looks depends upon where you actually are, how whether you have any knowledge of the ocean, whether you have direct experience of the ocean, and if you do, how deep is your center? How deep is where you are? Some people have some superficial knowledge of the nature of the ocean because their foot touched the water once. And that's a big deal. If your foot never touched the water, you don't know it exists. So if it does, it's a big deal. But there's a huge difference between your foot touching the water and you sinking to the bottom, being fully awake and fully conscious. So in that, the entire world, the world and everything in it, the creative process as a whole, just completely disappears. But once you awaken to the creative process, in the context of full knowledge and cognizance of who you really are, in that wakefulness, in that enlightened awareness, you fully embrace the challenge of incarnation as the energy and intelligence that gave rise to it in the first place, and you know who you are now. So you're on in a sense, you could say you're a divine missionary. You're on a divine mission. You know who you are. You know why you're here. And you know from the perspective of absolute non-duality, because the absolute non-duality says and reveals to us that there is only one and not two. So if there is only one and not two, that means you, and you alone, are the only one who could have chosen to give rise to all of this. No one else could have done it. That means you and you alone. And we have to really have the courage, the metaphysical courage, to embrace this inconceivable truth that there is only one and not two, and therefore I'm the only one that could have chosen to have done all this, which means this is all me. And if it is, I'm responsible for all of it.
In other words, he's asking, you ask the question for yourself.
That's why I have.
Why to why not? He's saying, why did you say why?
Why?
First he said, why to why not?
So,
Now he's saying, why did you say why?
he is saying, you are the best person to answer it.
No, I think I have a question for both of you. Both of you on the same understanding. So I come to Prabhuji's house, to my Guruji's house, I'll be in the domain of consciousness. I go back home, I'll be in the domain of my ego.
That's too bad. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. so you are moving between, this domain of awakening versus domain of ignorance.
That's terrible.
So if you're in the
Don't
bottom
do
of
that.
ocean,
Don't do that.
exactly, you're in
You
the
shouldn't leave your guru's house. So the guru's house in reality is not a place in time and space, is it?
Yeah, it is not in time and space.
So if you truly come to the guru's house and recognize what it means, you should never leave it.
the thing is, I think exactly what you said, you know, you are in the bottom of the ocean, then you're on the surface. The surface is where the turbulence is, everything is.
Not only turbulence,
So there is beauty, there is creativity.
beauty,
Yeah,
unspeakable beauty, inconceivable, God's creativity is inconceivable, unimaginable, beyond breathtaking. Look at the universe. Look at the creativity that's given rise to this universe, the creativity in the human body, the creativity in the human mind.
Sure.
It's not personal creativity, it's not my creativity, it's the creativity of God expressing Himself or herself in and through human form. It's majestic. That's why when we hear beautiful music, when we see beautiful art, read beautiful literature, see beautiful architecture, it's the echo of the Absolute, and it brings us to our knees.
Absolutely. So my question is this. How do you break this ego? I believe you are an ego killer, Guru. So
Actually, there was recently in spiritual speaking tree, there was an article on breaking ego by,
The day before yesterday.
yes,
Yeah.
it was very beautiful.
Thank you.
I wish to hear from both of you, you know, like a seeker like here. What is the best way to break the ego? Quicker, faster?
Fast track approach.
So it's a practice, right? I mean, that's what you mentioned in that.
Well, I don't think we can break it. Breaking the ego, I don't think can really work. But we have to want moksha so badly that we allow ourselves, we give ourselves permission to be swept away by that. So for example, let me just answer this one question. Then. So when I met my guru, A.W.L. Punjaji, in 1986, I was one-pointed in my search for enlightenment. I'd reached that point in my life when I literally wanted nothing else. And I knew it, and I had no doubt about it. I was determined. I was going to succeed one way or the other. So I was sitting with him in his room, and he was sitting on his bed, and I was sitting on a chair. And I heard myself say the words, and I was shocked when I heard it. I'm ready to die, but I don't know how. But it wasn't Andrew saying those words. I didn't think, I'm going to say these things to the Master. I heard myself say these words, and I didn't even know where they came from. I was shocked, because it was as if someone else was speaking through me. And in my terminology, that comes from what I call the authentic self. But what I'm trying to explain to you is it's not the self we believe ourselves to be under the hypnotic conviction that we are the small self. It came from a part of me that I didn't know, but that was closer to me than I could imagine. So I heard myself say the words spontaneously, I'm ready to die, but I don't know how. In the same way, after I left my guru and I was already beginning to teach, after 6 months I came back to see him. And when I entered the room, the first thing he said to me is, I'm so glad you found a friend you're never going to be able to see. I'm so glad you found a friend you'll never be able to see. So, can you see yourself? Can you see yourself? No. You can't see yourself, because you are yourself. You are the self. So, I don't think we can break the ego, but we have to be so desperate, I believe. We have to be so desperate and so earnest that we're willing to let go, allow ourselves to be swept away, to give it all to God in that sense. And we're really ready to do that. We're ready to die. Metaphysically, we're ready to die metaphysically. And in that there has to be a willingness to trust unconditionally, and that friend will never be able to see. So the ego never trusts unconditionally. It always knows better about everything, and it's full of fear and doubt and mistrust. So getting to the point where we're willing to trust in that friend we're never going to be able to see is what makes it possible for the ego to fall away. And the thing is, the ego in most cases never permanently disappears, but it becomes sattvic because it becomes the less dominant structure in the self. Instead of being the dominant structure of the self, it becomes the weaker half, because now we've submitted to the deeper truth of who we really are. And this takes so much power away from the ego's identity. And if we're able to stabilize in that, the ego becomes, as my guru used to say, it becomes sattvic. But we can't break it because the ego's not interested in its own demise.
Yeah.
So the ego's never interested in this, and it never was. So what I encourage people to do is that the reason that you've come to your guru, and the reason that you come to your guru, is because the deepest part of yourself is awakening to itself, and you have to be willing to trust that in a way that the rational mind can't understand. Because the rational mind sits back and says, but I don't understand this. I can't see it. And if I don't understand it and I can't see it, it can't be real. But that part of the self can never see these things, can never know these things. And it takes most people a long time, if ever, to truly grasp something so subtle, so profound. So, as I'm sure Prabhuji speaks a lot about, it has a lot to do with releasing ourselves into not knowing. Not always already knowing, which is ego death.
Sorry.
No, my question doesn't exist anymore.
Okay.
The identity is dissolved.
Coming back to that answer, there's no need to drop the ego. Because ego is a shadow. Okay? Shadow has no existence actually. The shadow is the absence of light. Okay? The whole concept of dropping the ego is to chase the shadows, which will never succeed. You are giving importance to something which doesn't exist. They focus on what is real rather than focus on what is not real. Shadow is not at all real. The constant focus should be the real self. When we say I, okay, the I has two components. There is a changing component of I. There is not changing component of I. The changing component of I is constantly changing. The changing component of I has the references body, mind, intellect and the roles. Not a moment it's constant. It is constantly changing. But when you say I, 10 years back I was here, now I am here, tomorrow I will be there, the I is not changed. So in fact, really, you have never forgotten that you real I. Deep in your unconscious, the real I always is there. That's why always you claim that I was there. But if you look at your life, the body has changed, the mind has changed, the intellect has changed. And the changing part is what I call as ego. And not a single moment you can catch that ego, because the last ego, 2 minutes back, what was the ego? Now it's changed. So catching ego and destroying the ego is catching his shadow, which will never work. So focus on what is real. And that real has nobody has to tell you. You already know, because you claim that 20 years back or 30 years back I married that lady. Okay, that time you were younger and slimmer and she was younger and slimmer. that is the part which is changing. But I has not changed. So go after that I. Once you go after that I, this unreal I will fall. So wherever our attention goes, we see that. For example, my attention goes to that light, I see the light. My attention goes to the book, I see the book. So our attention always should go to the real. Don't worry about chasing shadows. Don't worry about dropping ego. Focus on what is real. Unreal will get dropped. So the method of Vedanta for this is understanding what is real, what is unreal. A discriminative process. This is called Viveka. The teaching of what Vedanta I do is sharpen your discriminative ability. So the moment to moment you are able to should be discriminate. And for your kind information, you have never forgotten I. Real I has never forgotten. The consciousness of Brahman is always there in your background, subconsciously, and all the time it's there. That's why it pops up. Every time when you say I, You say that are real I. But every time you confuse with the body, mind and intellect and mix with the shadow. So we don't have to drop shadow. We have to throw the light of discrimination, the wisdom on that shadow. The shadow will disappear. Focus on the real, don't focus on the unreal. Okay, it's like somebody saying, he went to a guru, I want to meditate. Then guru told him, I want to meditate, I want to drop my ego. Okay, same question. So the guru told him, fine, very simple. You go and chant a mantra. Okay, I'll give you a mantra. But when you chant the mantra, never think of a monkey. So the moment he goes there, sits there, mantra once, one monkey is sitting here. Next mantra is sitting here. Next mantra is sitting here. Okay, whole room is full of monkeys. So this is the process of chasing the ego. The moment you start thinking of ego, how do I chase the ego? You are actually going after monkeys. Don't go after monkeys. Catch hold of the real I, which you already know. Moment to moment, catch hold of the real I. The unreal I will get dropped.
Yes, I have nothing to add.
Okay.